Resuming debate, the honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will be splitting my time with the honourable member from Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, I stand in this House humbled by the opportunity to speak on Bill C-14, an act to amend the Criminal Code and to make related amendment to other acts, medical assistance in dying, third reading, an important issue facing all Canadians. Every time I come in this House, I come in wearing three hats. The first is the hat entrusted in me as a Member of Parliament representing my constituents, the constituents of Richmond Hill. The second hat is the hat of a legislator working hard to make the best decisions for all Canadians. And the third hat is that of an individual with his own convictions and beliefs. Today, through you, I will make my open heart and share my thoughts process, hoping to reach the hearts of all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, let me start by acknowledging how challenging of an issue this is. It's difficult for a person to engage in a conversation about death, and yet our government has honorably took on this responsibility. On April 30th, I participated in a York Region town hall where a sizable portion of the attendees were from Richmond Hill, and they passionately spoke on this matter on all sides. I'm inspired by the passion found within my constituency, and I would like to assure them that all Canadians, that we are in this together. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I'm sharing my story with this House, the story that complements the perspective of my constituents and the work we do in this House. This is the story of my father's journey dealing with the inner turmoil caused by cancer. And it's the exact reason why I'm so passionate about this bill. I wrestled with this issue because each one of my hats had a strong stake in this debate and the final decision made. Mr. Speaker, it's well known to many the difficulty of beating cancer. However, despite the odds, my father fought this disease, and with all his power, he fought it and he succeeded. But unfortunately, his success was short-lived and the relapse in no time. As a loving and supporting family, we did everything for my father to keep him happy and comfortable during the end of his days. But no matter what we did, we were not good enough to relieve him from his pain. No amount of moral and social support was stronger than his inner suffering. We provided him with palliative care, but it was not enough. It broke my heart to watch my father slowly lose himself through the process. At the end, he was more concerned about the impact of his suffering on us rather than on him. After all, his pain was alleviated with heavy doses of morphine. His mental pain and hit on his pride, however, did not have any remedy. Mr. Speaker, I've heard the concern that providing medical assistance in dying would negatively impact vulnerable people. But as stated before, what made my father vulnerable was not having the options to put an end to his journey. Eventually, my father suffered from two illnesses, one physical and the other mental. The amount of pain he was going through physically began affecting him psychologically as well. He began isolating himself from us. In the end of his days, he was suffering alone. I agree with the government's commitment to support quality end-of-life services and to continue working with provinces and territories to improve palliative care. Canadians and Richmond Hill Community have made it clear that it is what they wanted. To that end, the government has committed to a long-term investment in palliative care of $3 billion over 4 years. However, no amount of investment in palliative care would have relieved my father's agony. My colleagues, my father's experience is not a unique one, and I'm sure that others in this House know of someone who has endured similar distress. We have a big responsibility to Canadians. Our responsibility is to make Canada great, to provide Canadians with means for a better life, to facilitate the realization of their vision and to help them achieve their dreams and aspirations. We're elected to represent their wishes, to provide services, and to make legislation to achieve those ends. So let's look at the data that speak to what Canadians want. Polls show that majority of the Canadians accept the idea and would even request medical assistance in dying if it was available to them. Those polls also show that over the years, the acceptance level of MAID has been increasing. As Canadians become more aware of the matter, they begin to empathize with those that suffer. In Richmond Hill alone, the local parliament project has shown that over 70% of my riding agree that individuals who are terminally ill should be allowed to end their lives with the assistance of medical professionals. In February of 2016, a Statistics Canada demographic analysis showed that in Canada, persons aged 65 and over make up a recorded proportion of our population. It also showed that the proportion of seniors in our population has been increasing over the past 50 years and is counting, and the trend is continuing. What does this mean for us as legislators and representatives? It means that we must be forward-thinking in our legislations, and we must ensure there are mechanisms in place to deal with future problems. The Carter case has shown us already that our current legislation is outdated, and the Supreme Court has asked us to update it. We are faced with a June 6th deadline. Let's ensure that we are prepared for this demographic shift and potential need such as the one on the table today. In order to ensure that we are prepared for this shift, we must ensure that we address key issues in our current system. According to research article published by Palliative Medicine Journal, in Canada, we need to streamline our legislative, financial, and regulatory affairs in terms of delivery of palliative care services. This means that once again the legislation is passed, we must continue to conduct studies, address lagging areas of hospice and palliative care services delivery. I was fortunate enough to hear points of views of my neighbors in Richmond Hill during the town hall. They opened up and shared with me their heart content. The most powerful story came from people suffering with terminal illness, similar to the one that my father did. They spoke on the importance of making advanced requests, addressing the issue of mental illness and access to mature minors. I'm happy to hear that the government will appoint independent bodies to study this issue. I've seen the members of the relevant committees work hard to ensure that they are provided a reasonable approach to these legislations. It is after carefully thinking through all these issues that I've decided to support Bill C-14. I realize our government has genuinely worked hard on this bill. My colleagues, as I stand, Canadians do not have a choice on how to say goodbye to this world. My father died in my arms. He died in an attempt to say something to me, something I'll never know. He did not choose when to leave me. He did not choose how to leave. Through my declaration of this bill, Bill C-4, I'm sending 4 messages. To my conscience, I would say, rest assured that with this decision, you've balanced the 3 hats and responsibility to the best of your ability. To my dad, I would say, it took 10 years to understand what you wanted to say to me before you left me. Dad, in supporting this bill, I'm happy to carry your wishes forward. To my constituents and the Richmond Hill community, I want to assure you, you were consulted, you were heard, and you were well represented. To all Canadians, it's been a long and hard journey, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. But in order for the journey to begin, this bill needs to pass. Let's work together to take that first step. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Excellent. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend my colleague for his very heartfelt remarks and identify with him in the loss of close relatives. Mr. Speaker, one of the misleading points that has been said over and over again in this House is the percentage of Canadians that support euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, and inevitably You're quoting statistics that relate to a terminal illness, and this bill, Mr. Speaker, has nothing to do with terminal illness. But my question goes back to the issue of conscience protection. In the preamble, we've heard many of the Liberal colleagues today refer to the protection in the preamble. In the preamble, it says this: whereas nothing in this act affects the guarantee of freedom of conscience and religion. That's it. Then on page 8, clause 7, it says, for greater certainty, nothing in this section compels an individual to provide or assist in providing medical assistance in dying. Those are fine-sounding statements, Mr. Speaker, but there is no ironclad protection for the medical professional to not be involved in physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. There's no protection for him or her not to have to refer, to make an effective referral. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, there is absolutely no protection for those institutions which were created by volunteers, are staffed by volunteers, are run by donations of individual Canadians, hospices that were set up with the express reason to help people through those final days of life. Why would my colleague not ensure that at the very least physicians, medical workers, medical professionals, and institutions have that conscience protection to allow them not to participate in something that they find morally objectionable? Thank you, Mr.
Honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I thank my honourable member from across the aisle. I'd like to highlight the fact that there are 3 pillars that provides the proper safeguard in this matter. Number 1, we are providing proper safeguard for the people. We are providing safeguards for the doctors and the nurse practitioners, and we are also providing safeguard for the medical associations as well as other practitioners. And also want to mention that we will be working very closely with the provinces and territories to make sure that those proper safeguards are put in place and the people that need the help are protected. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for his actually very heartful speech and for sharing his very personal and profound story with the House. And I agree that I wish a bill like this was in place that would have alleviated his father's suffering in particular. I would like to ask the member, based on the personal experience, what is his opinion on granting Canadians the option for advance directives?
The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, I believe that Canadians need to have the option on how to end their lives. Unfortunately, my father did not have that option. When he was diagnosed with advanced case of cancer, when we consulted with the doctor and we asked for options, we were basically given a very interesting option. We were told that if you're a religious person, go pray, and if you're a science man, go bet on the science that 5% of the cases, such as your father, would die from heart attack. The other 95% will suffer deeply, and they would go through an organ failure. And whether we believed in science or not, we're lucky that he actually made the transition as a result of heart attack, and he passed away. But the most important thing is, during the town hall in the York region, I was also greeted with a couple from Richmond Hill who shared their story with me. The husband was actually suffering exactly the same as my father was suffering, and he was in that stage. And both of our stories really resonated with each other. I believe that Canadians should have this option. My father would have suffered much less had he not experienced as much prolonged mental stress, distress that we talked about. And the government has announced that they will appoint 1 or more independent bodies to study advanced requests in the context of medical assistance in dying. And I look forward being part of that consultation process, and I invite all the members from the House to participate. As I said, this is a journey of 1,000,000 miles or 100,000 miles, and this is the first step. We have to take that first step, but we need to stay engaged. Thank you.